what really happened with your host, Mike Rivero, because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Tuesday, June 20th, 2017. It's the summer solstice, and we have got a lot of stuff to talk about today. It's a very, very, very busy news day. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room ready to answer the phone when you call on in. Our third hour guest today, Dr. Renee Dufault. We're going to be talking about toxins in food. It's a topic that a lot of people are very concerned about. It just seems like all these food products we get from these corporations, they've all got stuff in there that we really ought not to be eating, and we're going to be talking about that and her disagreement on that issue over at the FDA. Tomorrow, our guest will be Marianne Azizi, who's an activist on family issues over in Israel, and she's going to be updating us with what's going on over there. Obviously, the big story right now, the terror attack in Brussels at the train station. Apparently, somebody who was reportedly shouting Aloha Snack Bar set off a bomb, apparently not a very well-built one, because the suspect is still alive. He's badly injured, and he was also shot. But apparently the bomb was a fizzle. They're saying it was a small explosion. There's an unconfirmed photo on Twitter that shows basically just more of a deflagration than a detonation. And so we'll get more information about that as it develops here. All right. Obviously, the really, really bad news is that the situation in Syria is deteriorating rapidly, and even Fox News earlier today was reporting, analysts are saying we're just getting closer and closer to a full-on clash in Syria between the U.S., Russia, and Iran. And, of course, they've been drooling over a war with Iran for a very, very long time. This may be the excuse for it, as it were. And we're seeing articles like this one over in The Hill. U.S. signals involvement in Syria could escalate. And, boy, what a change. I mean, first part of the year looked like it was all going to calm on down, and even the U.S. government was saying they were prepared to accept Assad remaining as president. Now, of course, they've gone back to the old agenda. Assad must go, so forth and so on here. And I'm not the only one who's noticed it. Over at The Independent in Great Britain, they ran an article saying it's very obvious. The U.S. Agenda is to strike at Assad, not necessarily go after ISIS. And even worse, based on the new demarcations, article out of Blacklisted News, the United States signals intention to occupy eastern Syria and divide the nation. And all of this is spinning out of that terrible shoot down. Okay, I'm hearing music for some reason.
Damn.
Hello? I'm hearing music.
Awesome ass.
Mike? Mike? And I don't know where that's coming from. Okay, there we go. Thank you very much. So, anyway, the United States is signaling a clear intention to occupy eastern Syria and divide the nation. And we know that's been part of the agenda. They want to carve off part of it for the future Kurdistan. The general goal throughout the Middle East is to break the larger, more powerful nations up into little tiny pieces that can be bullied and pushed around. That's always been that agenda. And as if to reinforce that, the U.S. is setting up yet another military base in Tabqa in the province of Raqqa. And again, all of this is illegal. The U.S. does not have any right under international law to be in Syria at all. Congress has not declared war. There is no resolution from the UN Security Council about any of this stuff. Now, we're getting more details about the shoot down of that Sukhoi 22. And, of course, the official U.S. story is that they were dropping bombs near the rebels that we're supporting. Notice they don't even say they dropped bombs on the Syrian rebels, just near. Near is a very flexible word. Near could be miles away. And, of course, Damascus and Russia are saying the plane was in an operation against an ISIS base. And here is the latest embarrassment for the U.S. Apparently, the Syrian jet wasn't able to even start its mission. It was flying toward the designated target in company with Russian aircraft when the U.S. shot it down. And can you imagine what would be going on if the U.S. had hit that, one of the Russian planes? So it's all a very, very dangerous situation here. Again, we're hearing from Kurdish politicians that the Syrian fighter jet shot by the U.S. was not attacking the Syrian Democratic Forces, the U.S. excuse. And basically came on out and said that the U.S. cannot make up any lame excuses as it is trying to deteriorate the relations between the Syrian army and the Syrian Democratic Forces. And that's exactly what's going on. Now, one of the articles we put up at whatreallyhappened.com earlier today was a link to the Syrian situation map, which is updated every day, and a link to the map as it was last March. And you can see the tremendous gains the Syrian government forces have made, and that's why the Pentagon is hitting the panic button on this. They're on the verge of losing this whole thing, and that's going to be a serious impediment to the continuation of this conquering of the Middle East and shackling them to the U.S. dollar. Now, we're going to do a quick shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. We're obviously talking about the very tense situation over in Syria, which appears inevitably headed to direct conflict between the United States, Russia, and Iran. And obviously, Claire and I are a little bit nervous because if we get into a real shooting war with Russia and it goes global, we're going to get hit here. We've got a ringside seat to Pearl Harbor. Now, as you know, Russia has issued basically what amounts to a no-fly zone west of the Euphrates. The airspace over Syria west of the Euphrates is banned for anybody except Russia and Syrian aircraft. And Russia has said that they will track and follow any other aircraft coming into that area and ask them to leave. And if they refuse, then they risk being shot down. Now, Australia decided this was an unacceptable risk. And earlier today, Australia announced they will cease their participation in the U.S.-led so-called International Anti-ISIS Coalition. And so, fearing the possible consequences and certainly not wanting to go up against Russia in a real war, the Aussies are packing up and they're heading back home. Meanwhile, the U.S. apparently is also taking the Russian statements very, very seriously. They're repositioning aircraft over Syria. And unfortunately, along with that, they're basically saying that the U.S. is shifting its aerial focus to attacking the pro-government forces in Syria instead of just ISIS. And the shoot down of the Syrian Sukhoi 22 represents the fourth such attack against Syrian forces in the last month. And again, the U.S. does not have a right to be there. The U.S. has, for all intents and purposes, invaded Syria. They don't want to admit that. They're still out there trying to sell that idea that they're only there for the war on terror. But obviously, that's not what's going on. It's another big lie like Saddam's nuclear weapons here. Now, the good news is the Syrian government found and rescued that pilot that was in the Sukhoi. Apparently, he was able to eject safely. And apparently he is in a hospital, but he's not in any danger. Had a few injuries. Ejection from a fighter plane can be a very, very traumatic experience. Now, the U.S. has issued another warning saying that the Syrian Democratic Forces, which are being backed and supported by the United States, will retaliate if the Syrian government attacks them again. And basically, again, they're ramping up the war rhetoric. Meanwhile, the anti-ISIS coalition forces apparently bombed a residential area in northeastern Syria, killing 12 civilians. So, Now, in Syria, and again, referring back to those maps of Syria in March, Syria today, as the terrorists are breaking ranks and skedaddling for the border with Iraq, they're taking their rage and frustration out on more civilians. It's turning into a humanitarian disaster, which always seems to be the outcome of these U.S. interventions. Look at the least peaceful places on planet Earth, and they all have one thing in common: the United States government has brought them democracy. So, apparently, Israel is providing a steady flow of cash and aid to the Syrian rebels, according to the Wall Street Journal. So they're a big contributor to this mess that's going on over there. And it's part of Israel's agenda. They want to gain a foothold in southern Syria, similar to their strategy in southern Lebanon during the Lebanese Civil War. And, of course, Israel wants permanent ownership of the Golan Heights and especially all the oil and gas underneath it. And apparently there is already a plan to build a pipeline across the bottom of the Mediterranean going from the oil and gas fields in the Golan, not to mention the ones offshore of Gaza, up to Europe, so they can sell the oil and gas. And apparently because of this, Israel and Cyprus are now making buddy-buddy, even though Cyprus, up until recently, supported the Palestinian cause. But pipelines are big business, there's a lot of money, and that's what's going on there. Meanwhile, story coming out of antiwar.com, while everybody else is watching Syria and Brussels explosion, apparently Israel illegal settlement construction rates are soaring all across the West Bank. They've just gone on this building frenzy to just get as many of these illegal settlements built as they can. So, sorry about that. I'm a little under the weather today. So, what is coming up next? And a lot of people, again, are sharing the opinion we're heading to a clash with Russia and Iran in Syria, if not a wider regional war. And again, going over to antiwar.com, after the ISIS war, a U.S.-Russia collision. And Vladimir Putin has been trying to keep everything low-key and calm, but I think he's reaching his breaking point, because his defense minister just came on out and said, repeated combat actions by U.S. aviation under the cover of counterterrorism against lawful armed forces of a country that is a member of the United Nations are a massive violation of international law and de facto a military aggression against the Syrian Arab Republic. Even ABC has come on out and said, yeah, this is what's going on. So there will be no more cooperation between Russia and the United States. Meanwhile, over in Qatar, they're saying that they will not open any negotiations regarding this so-called Gulf dispute until the blockade is lifted. That's their opening position. And again, Qatar has denied accusations that it funds terrorism, foments regional instability, or has cozied up to their enemy, Iran. And again, we know which nation funds terrorism in that part of the world and is fomenting regional instability. And we know that that nation absolutely hates Iran. So there's more of this. There is a concern being expressed over in this one news article at, let me give you the URL, thestar.co.ke, warning that Qatar's conflict with its neighbors could actually spread to the Horn of Africa, because everybody's involved with all these tribal alliances and mutual defense pact, and they're just talking about just right across the Red Sea. Everybody's getting dragged into this thing. Another article coming on out here from The Guardian, no less. America will regret helping Saudi Arabia bomb Yemen. And it's not a problem that is unique to Yemen. They're basically talking about how U.S. actions in all these countries are fueling just this anti-American fever. Just absolutely our blind hate and rage against Americans. There's graffiti all over the place. And yes, in the long term, it does increase the danger to the ordinary American people from acts of terror. In this case, real acts of terror. And again, what is very alarming about the current U.S. military posture is a complete disregard for what the long-term consequences might be. Now, the U.S. is making a big stink because an armed Russian jet flew very close to a U.S. reconnaissance jet. And the U.S. is claiming it came within 5 feet. That's the U.S. story. The story from the Russian media is that this reconnaissance jet was spying on Russia's Baltic fleet. And the fighter jet went up to warn them off, and then the reconnaissance jet veered in to the fighter. The fighter had to get away and then come on back and escort the plane out of the area. So we're seeing, it's trying to provoke something, trying to get something happening where they can say, oh, look what Russia did, and the war will be on. The U.S. has shot down what they're describing as an Iranian drone in Syria, shot down by an F-15 in southern Syria near Al-Tanf, which is that area where these U.S. forces got cut off when the Syrian government forces pushed through to the border with Iraq. And speaking of Iran, Iran's UN envoy is basically wagging the finger at U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson for his recent anti-Tehran remarks. And Tillerson told the House Foreign Relations Committee that the Iranian government continues activities and interventions that destabilize the Middle East. Where's your evidence on that one? And he added, Washington's policy towards Iran was based on supporting internal forces who could bring about peaceful change. In other words, another coup d'etat. The last one they tried was in 2009. That one fell flat on its face. And again, Iran is not a warlike country. They have not initiated a war of conquest against another country in over 200 years. It's not in their nature. And certainly since the Iranian Revolution of 1979 kicked out the U.S. puppet ruler, the Shah, Iran has pretty much tended to mind their own business. So anyway, Iran's UN envoy basically said that these comments he made, Tillerson made, are in violation of international law and norms and against the Charter of the United Nations. And yes, there are rules in there about, belligerence toward other countries. And by the way, nowhere in the UN Charter is any one country allowed to simply go on in and change the government of another country. Now, the war of words between Qatar and the United Arab Emirates is continuing to escalate to the point where Qatar is now accusing the United Arab Emirates of supporting the 9/11 terror attacks. So there's a growing diplomatic crisis over there. Now, turning over toward Korea, a lot of stuff going on over there. Secretary Tillerson is saying that the U.S. is holding North Korea accountable for the death of that student who was returned home apparently in a deteriorated condition. He died in the hospital. And Tillerson is now demanding 3 other Americans being held by North Korea be released. And to back that up, the U.S. has sent supersonic bombers in a show of force against North Korea. I don't really think that was a smart thing to do. I think if it had been handled calmly and politely, Kim Jong-un might have said, yeah, you can have these 3 kids back. We don't need to feed them. But when you send the bombers up there, it basically guarantees that Kim Jong-un is going to dig in his heels and say no. All right, we're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be back after these few words. Let's talk about the USS Fitzgerald, because it was a horrible tragedy. Fingers are pointing all over the place, and somebody really messed up on board that Arleigh Burke cruiser. Somebody really kind of messed up. Again, it's a warship. It's supposed to be capable of defending itself and avoiding these kinds of issues. As you know, 7 sailors died from the incident, and now apparently it's coming on out. They may have actually been locked into the flooding berthing area alive. That the captain had to give the order to close all the emergency hatches because the ship was on the verge of sinking, and they may have just drowned inside there. So, again, it just compounds the tragedy. Alrighty, now, let's see. Do you remember not too long ago, Hawaii's Tulsi Gabbard introduced legislation in the House of Representatives called the Stop Arming Terrorists Bill. And that's all it said. There were no strings, there were no riders, there were nothing whatsoever, other than it would be illegal for the United States to be supplying arms and weapons to Al-Qaeda and ISIS and these various other groups over there. And after nearly 5 months, Tulsi Gabbard has only been able to attract 13 of the 535 members of the House of Representatives to sign on as co-sponsors. And apparently Senator Rand Paul introduced this same legislation in the Senate. It got 0 co-sponsors. So once again, you see how the U.S. government actually loves these terror groups. They're giving them all kinds of goodies. At the same time, they're telling you you shouldn't be allowed to have any guns. We'll give them to Mexican drug lords. We'll give them to terrorists. We'll do all that stuff over there. All right, getting on to local domestic politics and corruption. Robert Mueller has hired yet another Clinton donor for his Russia probe, and they're out there saying, you know, Russia, 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 Russia. Do you know that the Russian ambassador visited the Obama White House 22 times? Nobody made a big deal about it. Meeting with foreign dignitaries is, in fact, part of the job description. Now, Putin, in one of his segments when he was talking to Oliver Stone, came on out and said the United States repeatedly interferes in Russian elections. We know that the United States has interfered in the elections of something like 80 other countries since the end of World War II. And that's what makes it so hypocritical. And again, Oliver Stone made a very cogent comment. Why are we talking about this alleged, this mythical Russian interference with our politics when Israel is interfering with our politics all the time? And of course, the big stink there is that when Stephen Colbert got into a fight with Oliver Stone about that, CBS edited that out because you're not allowed to say bad things about Israel on corporate media. You just don't do that sort of thing. Now, top Democrat Adam Schiff has come on out and admitted in the corporate media they have found no evidence of Russian collusion that they could take into a court and put before a jury. And then he turns around and says, well, we just have to investigate that much harder. We have to know if the Russians have something compromising on President Trump here. Well, they weren't all that worried about compromising connections when it was Hillary Clinton selling out that uranium, did they? And by the way, apparently the Senate is launching their first new Clinton corruption investigation since the Trump election, and this involves that foundation. I hope they find something here. Getting on back to the House Russia probe, they have issued 7 subpoenas, and 4 of the subpoenas are related directly to the accusation of Russia meddling, which is also the subject of probes over in the Senate Intelligence Committee and the FBI. The other 3 are focusing on the allegations of improper unmasking of Trump campaign officials. This according to the Wall Street Journal. Now, those 3 subpoenas went to the CIA, FBI, and National Security Agency and are related to questions about how the names of these associates of President Trump were unredacted and distributed in classified Obama administration reports during the transition period. Now, a little bit of a wrinkle. Susan Rice is right in the middle of this unmasking scandal. And Judicial Watch last April filed a Freedom of Information Act request for these documents related to the unmasking scandal. And apparently what has now happened is Judicial Watch has been informed that all of those records have already been sent to the Obama library, and the library will be closed to the public for at least 5 years. Actually, I went to the website for the Obama Presidential Library, and they say they're going to be open next year. But that's the excuse. Can't see them for 5 years. And Judicial Watch is now considering legal moves to have the Freedom of Information Act lawsuit honored, even though the building, the library, is closed to the public. Now then, getting on back to our class action lawsuit against the Democratic National Committee and Debbie Wasserman Schultz, the attorney handling the case has basically said the evidence they've uncovered, the Democratic National Committee was just running as a Ponzi scheme and completely out of control of the members of the Democratic Party. And again, the DNC's defense against this class action lawsuit is Bernie Sanders supporters should have just understood up front that they were going to hand the nomination to Hillary Clinton. And again, that's nonsense. If you're just going to anoint the Empress Hillary, why did you go through the whole primary process? Obviously, you intended to deceive those Bernie Sanders supporters. Now, again, and this is coming out of Sputnik News, the Clinton Foundation's trustees and their donors may find themselves in a heap of trouble. And this is coming from Wall Street analyst Charles Ortel. And he says, the good news is that foreign governments that donated to the Clinton Foundation could actually recover their funds. And given that Hillary did not win the White House, I'm sure they probably want their money back. So basically, Charles Ortel is calling the Clinton Foundation the largest unprosecuted fraud ever. And it does need to be investigated. It does need to be prosecuted. And then we need to look at how many of these other foundations that are being run by politicians are engaged in the same kind of skullduggery, pay for play, and so forth. All right, we're coming up here on another commercial break, I hope. And okay, no, we didn't miss the break. It's just now starting. Okay, there should be the music. There we go. We're good. Be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to take a phone call here from Steve in Oregon. Steve, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. I just wanted to let your audience know that I think it was hubris that caused that ship accident. I have, it's a title of a YouTube. It's a hilarious radio conversation between the U.S. naval ship and Spanish authorities. And
is that the one about the lighthouse?
Yes.
Okay. Well, that's a very funny joke, and, you know, it sounds like something an arrogant ship commander would do. But again, there are rules regarding the right-of-way on the ocean. And at the very top of the list are these giant super tankers and large cargo container vessels. You get out of their way because they don't have the ability to change their speed quickly or alter their course quickly. And so anybody who's, you know, a captain is going to understand the military ship gives way because it does have the speed and maneuverability. Everybody just had to be asleep. Whoever's on the lookouts, whoever's watching the radar, whoever's listening to the sonar, it is just, you know, amazing that this could have even happened to begin with. But then if you go back and you look at all the times that Navy ships have collided with cargo ships and other warships and even submarines, and again, we had that horrible incident here with the USS Greenville and all those Japanese fishing students who died. So it does happen. And is there a serious technology problem with the sensors on our warships? Are they not able to really see what's out there and coming closer? Now, aircraft have something called a TCAS, which is a transponder close approach system. that will actually flash a warning if something is getting closer to you. And I would imagine that our warships would certainly have something like that that would sound an alarm when there's a target out there on a constant bearing.
Yes. Well, the conversation is pretty hilarious. You know, we have an armada and the lighthouse saying, well, we got a dog and we got a sleeping canary. You better move 15 degrees. You're going to run into us. It's pretty hilarious.
Yeah, I know. I've heard it many, many times before. I used to do a lot of sailing. I was a rag setter in my youth, and Claire and I were actually married on a sailboat. And so I've spent a lot of time on the water myself. Okay?
Yeah, blessings.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. Now then, a lot of attention is being focused on Jon Ossoff. He's a 30-year-old Democratic candidate for Georgia's special elections runoff, which I guess is happening today. And it's being proclaimed as a bellwether for next year's midterm elections. You know, can the Democrats come back from Hillary's defeat? Can they retake the Congress? And there's been just huge amounts of money poured into his campaign. In fact, he got 9 times more donations from the state of California than from his own home state of Georgia. And so they're just really putting a lot of focus on that. They're hoping that he can win the seat and, you know, have one more Democrat. And it's another indicator that the liberal Democrats, the Hillaryites, they haven't given up. They have not accepted their defeat. They're even calling Ossoff the Trump Slayer. And as of right now, this is the most expensive House race in history. So huge amounts of money pouring on in from the liberals out in California here. All right, let's talk a little bit about the violence in our streets. And it's heartbreaking to watch. We've been seeing it even before the election began. So there's an article that came out from Investment Watch blog about people are devolving into degeneracy and violence. Do not join the club. And obviously there are a lot of reasons for you not to do that. First and foremost, you can get hurt. But more importantly, as the government becomes more afraid of the American people, they're going to work to turn us against each other, to encourage us to fight and possibly even kill each other. They did it back in the 1960s when mass opposition to the war in Vietnam was starting to grow. It actually united the American people. And the FBI went out there as part of their COINTELPRO program to try and split the population back apart again, along racial lines, along gender lines. And they really worked very hard to fan up race hatred. And it seems to be happening all over again. When you're out there in the streets of your town, in your village, you know, the black people are not your enemy. The white people are not your enemy. The Hispanics are not your enemy. That private central bank, that's your enemy. Because that's ultimately what's driving us to this new world war. And we do need to unite as a single American people and stop letting all of these wedges, like what is your gender, what bathroom do you use, is it okay to wear certain colors, all this nonsense about people being triggered by trivial nonsense. It's all part of the divide and conquer strategy. Now, poll is showing that 73% of Americans are saying that the political debate is encouraging the violence. And they're absolutely right. Everybody's scratching their head about, you know, just what motivated this shooter in Virginia to open fire on Republican politicians. It's all the encouragement we've seen in the media. Whether it was Kathy Gifford or any of these other people saying, yeah, let's go on out, let's get them. Now, there's another very good article. This is in Blacklisted News. We're in a boiling point crisis of exploitive elites. And this is a very interesting article because it talks about repeating cycles of history. that lead to crises, economic, social, and political crises, and how these cycles are always sparked by elites who decide that the rest of us exist simply to be exploited, make money off of, send off to wars, and so forth, and equates our current society to the slavery era. And there is some legitimacy to that when you remember that in the antebellum slave plantations, the slaves would work half the time taking care of their own needs and the other half of the time for the plantation owner, 50-50. And that's the rate at which we're all being taxed right now. So where's this going to go? Well, unfortunately, the cycles show that we are edging closer to a civil upset, a civil war, a revolution. And again, these are something that I have worked the last 20 years trying to prevent from happening. But at this point, I accept it as inevitable now. And we all better be planning for how we're going to get through this, build a sense of community, start to de-link from those mandated corporate supply chains. Because when they collapse, it's going to be very, very, very hard. Okay, now, moving along here. Interestingly enough, Representative Lamar Smith, in an interview with Breitbart News, basically came on out and said, fake news is a threat to our democracy. And went on to say that the media bias today is a threat to our democracy for this reason. If American people can't get the facts, they can't make good decisions. He's paraphrasing Thomas Jefferson right there, who said the highest duty of every American citizen is to keep yourself fully informed so you can make good choices. And the corporate media is just nonstop feeding you all kinds of nonsense to get you to do what they want you to do. Remember a few months ago, Mika Brzezinski literally admitted on TV that in her worldview, the job of the corporate media is to control what you think. So you need to stop letting them control you. Now, the corporate media is losing traction because we have heard all of this Trump bashing for month after month after month after month. And the latest Rasmussen reports are showing that President Trump's approval rating is 50% of likely voters. That's a very good number when you consider the media bias against him. And by the way, it's going up. Now, over at CNN, they have been chastised for yet another one of these gun-grabbing hysterical articles where they came on out with the claim guns kill almost 1,300 U.S. children annually, which is a horrible tragedy. But what they did was they blended in teenagers. They counted teenagers as children and neglected to mention that most of those shootings were actually homicides, intentional killings. And if somebody wants to intentionally kill somebody else and they can't get a gun, they'll use something else. They'll use a sword, they'll use a knife, they'll use poison. And so this idea of portraying these as accidental deaths and a reason not to have guns in your home is ridiculous. Now, by the way, if you do have guns in your home and there are children around, you don't load them, you put gun locks on them. Again, safety, 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 safety. Now, over at Aletho News, they have an article that I think really says it all. Put the media scoundrels out of business. The simple way is just ignore them. Stop buying the publication. Stop buying newspapers, magazines, other material. You're wasting good money on rubbish. Tune out the fake news broadcasts. Unfortunately, my cable company will not disconnect CNN, Fox News from the lineup. But yeah, just stop giving them your business. Stop reading their ads. Stop buying the products. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Don in Iowa, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. I want to talk a little bit about this guy that tried to be a shooter in Virginia.
Yeah, Hodgkinson.
one thing about it is it could be that there was somebody else with him. See, the thing about him is ever since it happened, and the mainstream media just forgot about it. Nothing else to talk about. It just happened, and now it's over, and we have nothing else to. They're not trying to dig into this guy's life story or anything like that.
Oh, well, they dug into it pretty solid. I mean, lifelong Democrat, Bernie Sanders supporter. And I think the reason the media has dropped the story is because it makes the Democrats look bad. I mean, the liberal Democrats are always the ones out there screaming that Republicans are the gun nuts and Republicans are dangerous. And here we have a Democrat gunning down Republican politicians, and it builds sympathy for the GOP. And, again, it does look bad for the Democratic Party, and I think that's why the media has dropped it.
That's why they dropped it, but they could have also, tried to see, well, was there somebody else with him? We don't know. He died. He's dead. They couldn't interview him. One thing that would indicate that maybe somebody was that knew about killing people was thinking about this whole thing was he went there to at the baseball field. None of those congressmen were going to have a gun themselves, whereas they might if it was some other kind of a deal like a picnic. Let's say when they were in civilian clothes.
Yeah, but the Capitol Police were there. Not enough of them, obviously. But the Capitol Police were there. Now, the reason I don't think that this guy had anybody else with him is two reasons. First of all, he walks up and asks the bystander, are these Republicans or Democrats? And then he goes and gets his gun, and he starts shooting. And apparently, if you look at how many rounds he fired versus how many people were actually injured, he's a terrible shot.
It's more like suicide. It was more like a suicide deal, really, suicide by cop.
Yeah, it could very well have been. There's still that issue that apparently he did have a list of other GOP names in his pocket. But, yeah,
that's the reason. As far as anybody knows, that's why he came from Chicago to the D.C. areas to kill Republican politicians. I mean, there's no other reason for him to be in Virginia, right?
Well, he told his estranged wife that he was going to Washington, D.C. to work on tax reform. And by the way, he's not from Chicago. He's from somewhere else in Illinois. But apparently this is a guy in the sunset of his life. His business had shut down.
Well, we know he could have terminal cancer. He just found out or something like that.
Or he could have been out of his head on prescription antidepressants. And again, that's something else that we're not being told.
As far as Alex Jones crossing over, you said yesterday you were saying you think he might be crossing over to the mainstream media. He can't really do that. What he's trying to do, I think, is kind of set up a parallel universe, something like what Ted Turner did with CNN. I mean, he does kind of have grandiose dreams about having a big TV, radio, 24-hour-a-day news and all this kind of stuff. But he's not gonna. He can't completely. And he does. I think he does want to get on cable TV, but he's not going to all of a sudden be like. He's going to be totally different than all the rest of them. He has to be. He has to be himself.
Well, again, if he is seriously harboring ambitions to go corporate, then he's going to have to play by the corporate media's rules. And that, of course, will alienate. Again, the way he backed off from Sandy hoax. In the Megyn Kelly interview, says that he's trying to send a message that he will behave if he's allowed into the corporate media.
But he did stick with the 9/11 as an inside job. He stuck with that in the
well, he kind of has to. Pretty much everybody in the United States knows that was a hoax.
Yeah, but the MSM does not admit that.
No, of course they won't. They never will.
Right. So what I'm saying is he's. But anyway. What else was I going to say? I guess that's enough for now.
Okay, good, because we're coming up on a commercial there. So, Don, thank you very much for the phone call. Getting on back to Alex Jones and Megyn Kelly, the rumors are flying out of NBC that they may decide to just fire her, end the contract. I mean, they spent $20 million to lure her away from Fox and give her this show, and the ratings just continue to decline. A lot of people thought the controversy over Alex Jones would bring the audience in. Nobody bothered tuning on in. The people who are supporting the official story of Sandy Hook were trying to boycott it. And I think Alex Jones' own fans may not have tuned into the show because they realized it was going to be a Megyn Kelly hatchet job on him, and they didn't want to even see that. But apparently there are panic meetings in the executive offices over at NBC, and they may let her go. And NBC, I could use a job. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Let's take a few more phone calls. Sherry in Texas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. My phone was crackling, so excuse me if it does that. I've never had that problem before. But speaking of problems, there is a problem with AM radio talk show hosts that I've noticed. Mm-hmm. It's like if you want to keep your job, you have to pit the Republicans against the Democrats. You have to really diss the liberals way beyond just snowflakes level. I mean, I was listening to Rush Limbaugh, and he has a pretty big audience, I guess.
Yes, he does.
And yeah, and this is his message. It's all about. I mean, it's nasty. It's ridicule. It's intimidation, and he says all liberals, like there's no exception. You know, the corporate abuses affect us all. You can't talk about that now. I want to know where I'm wrong. Who in AM radio, because I don't get a lot of stations. I can't find where a lot of people are because I need to go into websites to find out where everyone is. But who in an AM talk radio doesn't diss liberals? I mean, I don't know how Alex is going to survive. You can't talk about global warming as it really is, and you have to diss liberals. Those are two things like, okay, you want to be on AM, you want your salary paid by a corporation, this is what you've got to do. It seems that way to me. Oh, excuse me. I've been on speaker. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. You sound a lot better now.
Yeah, I'm awfully sorry. I've got the bad habit of leaving that on. Okay.
Okay, don't worry about it. Here's what's going on. First of all, corporations that own a lot of media do use them for platform. Some are very much pro-liberal. Some are very much pro-conservative. And you need to understand that back during the second war in Iraq, there was a company called Clear Channel Communication that just came out of nowhere with vast amounts of money and just literally was buying up all the AM radio in America. And it wasn't just talk radio. They were buying music stations, and they had a ban list of songs you were not allowed to play, which included a lot of the anti-war songs out of the 60s and 70s. So basically, when you work for a large corporation on a radio station, you basically, do what they want you to do. That's true of any employer. That you're going to go on in and you're hired to do a certain thing. In the case of Rush Limbaugh, he's big enough where he can pretty much, talk about what he wants to talk about. And of course, he is a conservative. And he does go after the liberals. But then we have all these other like TV news networks that are very much in the opposite direction, and they're constantly going after conservatives and Trump and so forth. So you're going to have to strike a balance there somewhere. I don't know about AM talk show hosts because outside of the ones here at Republic Broadcasting, I don't pay a lot of attention to them. But I do know that one of the cool things about working here at Republic Broadcasting is they do allow a diversity of opinion. Nobody has come on in and told me what stories to do. Nobody's come on in and said, you can't do this story. And that's a really cool thing about RBN. Anyway,
okay.
Yeah.
Can I say one real quick thing?
You're gonna. I
called an AM station, and the ridicule I got. I said, "That's all right, guys. I'm used to it. You're the corporate media.
Okay.
I have to expect these things." Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Bye bye. We're going to do a station identification. We'll be back with more phone calls.